Fabian Vogelsteller is not just a developer, but he's an integral part of our community. And I say it that way because I've been very impressed by his commitment to community and his sort of personal mission that has manifested in the things that he has built to contribute to the community. He's the developer of the ERC20 token, among many other things. He's also the co-founder with Marjorie of Lukso, which he may or may not tell you about right now, and if he doesn't, ask him. And most of all, we're really honored that he's decided to join us. It's a privilege to have him with us, so please welcome Fabian Vogelsteller.
Thank you for that nice introduction. I will talk about security tokens, but I will actually take a very different angle than the whole morning because I'm a software developer. You know, I come from doing things which work. The computer doesn't, you know, complain too much. It just does it. That's always good. So security tokens, and why do we need standards? And I want to a little bit roll back here because all the discussions about tokens and all of these things, but it's very important to where this is coming from and what it even is. So everybody talks about blockchain, right? At least in the last few years, but now everybody's talking about tokens. Everybody's talking about tokens. And that's actually pretty new since 2017, mainly because that's when all these ICOs happened and when a lot of people woke up to tokens and blockchain, which was before like just Bitcoin and you know, the whatever dark market and something weird going on. Suddenly it became accessible and it became interesting for a lot of other people. But what is very important, and this is kind of, it's not really part of the conversation, that's why I want to refocus on that, is that there's actually two things here. What is a token, right? We think, oh, like, a token, sure, that's like something representing something, and it's somehow on the blockchain and so on. But we have to really clearly differentiate. There are two things we are talking here. There's a cryptocurrency and there's a token. And they are very distinct, different things. A cryptocurrency is the fuel of a network. It's kind of what you use to pay for your transaction fees and what you also can use for payment on the network and for whatever use you want to have on that blockchain. It's an integral piece of the blockchain system, and it's the lifeblood. It's what makes it secure. So if you take out this token, then somebody has to maintain the system and protect it, like put a proxy in front or do something that you cannot just attack it. If you have a decentralized system, the tokens is what makes it work. It's the integral part to even make that function in any way. That's very important. It has a very important functionality, and it's not something you can take away if you want to make an open system. It protects from spam because it costs you to use the network, and it incentivizes people to participate in running and maintaining this network. That is very different from a token. It's absolutely very different. And what is a token? We have to understand this. And me coming from Ethereum, you know, worked the last 3.5 years at the Ethereum Foundation and built many, many things in there which had quite an impact. It's very important to understand how this works because all of our discussions, they're kind of based on that, on understanding this. And what is a token, right? A token is a smart contract. It's a piece of code deployed on the blockchain sitting at an address. And in this case, it's a smart contract which itself has an account balance. It's kind of like vertically having an account balance of other addresses who own whatever number right now. That's in the simplest form is what the token is. What makes it so interesting is not that this is now a new form of like Excel sheet, which is now distributed or something. The most interesting part of this is that this runs on a blockchain where it's not alone, but where it's surrounded and surrounded by a lot of other smart contracts or other programs running on the same virtual computer. And this can be, for example, a voting system. This can be a decentralized exchange. This can be a prediction market. That can be whatever we can come up with. And the very interesting part here is that this can talk to each other. The token can interoperate with all of the other smart contracts, and the other smart contracts can interoperate with it. And it mainly works because we have standardized it. And in this case, it's the ERC20. That's what brings me in the picture here, because I was the one who did that. This interoperability is the key of why this is such a big thing and why so many things are happening now. Because you can have systems which are automatically interoperable and interactable. So yeah, like I said, the ERC20, that's what I propose. This is kind of a very simple interface. It's actually just a few functions. And they just say, if you have a smart contract which is a token, at least it should have a total supply function, a balance of function, a transfer function, and a few other functions. And when you have that in your smart contract, which you build whatever you want, however you want, at least if you have those functions, these other smart contracts can interact with it, plus exchanges can interact with it, or wallets or any other system can interact with it, which makes it extremely compatible. And this is what happened. For the better or worse, right? It created a humongous new market, which is actually currently $12 billion, and I just calculated this recently based on the tokens on CoinMarketCap, and this is not the cryptocurrencies. This is not the blockchains. This is purely tokens, and 90% of them are on the Ethereum blockchain. So there are smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain, and that value is in the crypto winter, where we are in right now. So it's even on the bottom, still a lot of money. So it created this humongous market, and it created this whole new industry. Why? Because of the synergies it creates, of all that interoperability which is possible. And if you look at most of these things here in the list, we go back, these are all decentralized systems and protocols who try to achieve something. They're not trying to be an asset itself by representing shares or whatever. They're actually decentralized systems. They are decentralized exchanges, or they are wallet systems, or they are even like pre-tokens for a future blockchain, or in this case, the Binance is an exchange, right? So it can be many, many things built on whatever these smart contracts do and how they interact with other systems. So what we had is, especially in the times from 2013 on, cryptocurrencies first, in 2013, all the forks of Bitcoin, the Litecoin and so on, and then later the tokens, they were the lifeblood of decentralized systems. They have a functionality and a purpose. Obviously, the most necessary purpose of a token is the cryptocurrency, because it's necessary to run the system. Otherwise, you have to figure out another way to protect it, which ends up being just an old web server proxy system, which we already have since 30, 40 years. But it's the lifeblood system, and now there's a lot of token economics where people think, okay, what can these incentive systems, what can these lifeblood systems be? But the ERC20 and all of these ICOs we saw in 2017 actually opened up a complete new picture. It opened up this picture of endless possibilities. These tokens don't necessarily need to be part of a decentralized system. They can actually represent anything. And that's what happened. A lot of startups saw, okay, I can raise money here in a new form. I can create a new, I can engage differently with my customer, or I can engage my community around my product or my service I want to create. But more so, and that we see now with the security token industry and all of these discussions, it can be real-world assets. It can be anything which sits outside of the blockchain, which is not easily directly verifiable by a smart contract. And these endless possibilities is what is creating this new wave, and to understand this and understand what this even means and how we can interoperate and interact with this, we have to understand where this is all coming from. And there's a very it's actually a root of all of this, and there's a root of the ERC20 and so on. There's something called Ethereum Improvement Proposals. And Ethereum Improvement Proposals is basically a place where it was meant to be hosting discussions for how we can improve the Ethereum protocol. So how we can change the consensus algorithm or remove proof of work, the mining, and blah, blah, blah. So the idea was to discuss with the community and have technical proposals and so on. Back in the day, in November 2017, I proposed the ERC20 as a specification. I called it ERC, Ethereum Request for Comment, and the whole idea was, we have a standard here of what a smart contract or token smart contract could look like. Let's just talk, and figure out if that makes sense. And I called it ERC. The idea was that we talk and that there will be a standard coming out of that. It ended up that the talk is the standard in a way, or at least this specification was then kind of what happened. And so what this created is that now a bunch of people are creating ERCs. I think we have, I don't know, I think we're at 1,000 something. So we probably have 800, 900,000 Ethereum requests for comment, meaning standardization proposals of all sorts and all angles of blockchains and smart contracts. Because if we standardize things and we adopt these standards, that doesn't mean the system has to function only this way. It just has to be interacted this way. It's just the interface which is standardized. We have a compatibility and a synergy level which is unprecedented, and which creates whole industries, as we have seen. What happens there is a bunch of people talk a lot and discuss, does this make sense, give input and so on. And in the regards of ERC20, basically at some point people felt it's not changing too much anymore. It's kind of like solid enough, and then people started to use it and integrate it themselves. The real proper format is, and this is evolved over time to make this better, is that you create a draft. You create a draft specification after you discussed it a little bit in the issues. You create a draft. For example, this is the identity standard called ERC75, which I proposed a year ago now, where there's now an alliance forming around. You put it as a draft, and then people could propose improvements. And then you can discuss on these improvements. But this is all happening completely public, out in the open. There's no committee, there's no secret room meetings. This is all just, everybody can just come and chip in, basically. It's all open source, so to say. The biggest thing what it creates is interoperability, and this is the key factor of all of this. And this is where security tokens come in, and that's the new wave of tokens, where it's about the real-world assets and creating the non-blockchain tangible things. As long as a token sits on the blockchain and can interact with smart contracts, it's all perfectly automatable, right? Because it can talk to these other smart contracts. When it sits off-chain, that's a different thing. And here you need regulations, and you have to have the intermediary and all of these things. So there are efforts underway to standardize this. This is actually based on ERC20 backwards compatibility. It's kind of like an extension of what came out of ERC20 and other standards. And the idea in this case, for example, is to add more regulatory friendliness and automation in that system by design. And if everybody adopts it, every exchange can interact with those things and process them properly, and wallets can be done in a way that they can signal the proper behavior and just make it very convenient. So there can be a lot of interfaces being built, which makes it fun and more, create a whole ecosystem around it. ERC 1400 and ERC 1410, this is a substandard which basically says, okay, a token can have sub-tokens. And I just want to show a little bit of what this is. There's a discussion in the community around this, for example, right now. ERC 1400 is basically just saying, okay, you have all these functionalities a token has, but you also add a document, which is then either legal document, or it could be even a smart contract, could be something linked to this, which represents maybe the legal representation or the metadata of the security. It has a functionality where you can check if a transfer would fail or not, and you can build in all kinds of checks and modules. For example, you could make it that it automatically checks, am I allowed to be transferred from this guy, or am I allowed to be transferred to this person? Am I within a certain tranche? Is my time already over? Am I unlocked now? Am I locked? You can build everything in that it just doesn't work or it works, right? So you have to check if it's sendable. Is it still issuable? So you know, can there be more added or not? You can always see how many there are. So cap tables and all of these things is rather easy to do from a technical point of view. You can issue only tranches and so on and so on. So this is a standard to try to make this more clear and interoperable, to be able to build all these interfaces. And there's a discussion going on. And then there's this other standard, the fungible. And this basically means, because in security tokens, we have that thing that we have different type of securities within one security. And there could be one which is issued to the founder. It might be locked for a period of time, and others are not locked, and others have certain rights, but another tranche doesn't have the certain rights, and therefore you need ideally a standard where you have tranches of one token. There's also other ways of how you could solve this. You could just issue a multiple amount of tokens, but having tranches is one way to do it. And the good thing is, if you define a default tranche, and then we are back to standardization, you are interoperable with whatever wallets already exist out there. So you can have even that security now still work in Coinbase or MetaMask or any of these crypto wallets we have right now. So this is the beauty of backwards compatibility and interoperability. What this brings, if this is adopted over time and used by people, you can have integrated compliance. You can have automated regulation, because you can build in modules which only allow certain things or don't allow certain things. You can have an automated reporting. You actually can have real-time reporting. You just can check any point in time what is the current situation. This obviously leads to fraud prevention and a lot more transparency. And this list could be probably endless long, but the most important part, again, is interoperability. Because suddenly I create something which can be it sits on the blockchain meta layer, which has to be obviously a public blockchain. We have to be able to verify that and trust that where it sits. But because it sits there, all exchanges and everybody can interact with it and doesn't need to have it themselves, and everybody has just copies of it, right? They all just look at the same data set, basically. And that's why the tokens took off in the blockchain space, and that's why in general the blockchain space and cryptocurrencies are taking off. So it's an endless amount of possibilities from here on. Just to show a few of obviously what are advantages with having securities or things on the blockchain in general. The first and most important thing I find the most interesting is, in the blockchain space, it's 24/7 all the time. Like the whole thing that you have weekends where markets shut down is a very old concept, especially for the crypto native generation, which just knows there's an exchange. It's just running all the time because it's automated. You can have fractional ownership. We talked here in the panel with real estate. That's a very interesting part. Obviously, settlement goes a lot faster. Increased liquidity, because if you have this asset on the blockchain, so you have liquidity because the asset sits on the blockchain. It can be reached by many markets. It just receive it or reach it or even read it from the same place. So it's not like in different silos, so to say. You have this automation in many ways. Can this be? It's data analytics dream, basically. Interoperability, a big part. And I would like to expand a little bit on the new design space. And this is something where we have to think outside of the box. Because everything is here, okay, now how can we put the old world now on the blockchain? And that's a nice idea. And it works, and it can automate a lot of things, but what is even more interesting is of what it now allows. What are the new things which can come? And a good example is if I have a house and I can now tokenize this house. Right now it's about, okay, yeah, I want to make profit from the value of this real estate and so on, and that's all fine. But I can have even more things coming out of this because I can say, okay, if I have a part of this house, this means also I have a certain possibility to access this. And this can all be represented through the same token. So maybe I have a stake to lock or stake a token, and then I get into the building, and I can use it for a certain period of time. And when I go out, it just unstakes my part minus maybe a cost or something. So I can now create models which combine the ownership and the securities, right, as ownership for value and so on, with functionality and with all kind of new possibilities and rights in an automated fashion. Or I can vote on what things are done on the real estate or what it's done for. All these kind of new angles of utility are possible now. They were just not possible before. Because going around with your certificate you got at the notary might be a very slow manual process to convince anybody to open you a door. So now you can have this automated, and there has to be no person. You just go in and beep, beep, and your smartphone or your future ring or your AR glasses would just open you the door. And that's actually not so far off because the technology is here, and these standards make it possible. And we have to allow now this creativity to take place and not like down-regulate it and think, okay, now this has to all like fit in our old boxes here nicely because if then it's too Wild West. It will be done anyway, and there will be then found ways around it to get this combination. But the more we actually let it happen and do it in a right way, because it's about creating standards which are preventing fraud by design. It's not about like letting people now go wild and then we have a bunch of scams. It's building things in such a way that they're not even allowing this fraud to take place in the first place. And there's a lot of ideas. There's also an idea I have with a more fair version of an ICO, which we might do for our project. And there's so many ways things you can do. But the combination of utility and ownership and the combination of participation in new forms, that's kind of like what really is what shines here and what this becomes and what this can make possible. And this is something we shouldn't underestimate. Because I think it will rapidly change how these current certificates, let's say, work. So that's all I have. Probably a lot more to speak about and a lot more we could discuss, but that's all for now.